All right, so Brian has another question for us. Good question though, and he asked with Meatrigs more specifically, like how are we tuning and how are we trimming meat or preparing it for the meathead?
So my first step is to make sure that it fits appropriately in the head. What I don't want is, especially with hand cuts, sometimes hand cuts end up being a little bit wide. They're too wide to go into the gap in the meathead. So the first thing I do is trim off, usually off the top, where I take the piece of meat and whatever part of it doesn't look the best. So if I can get the contrast in the strip from the black back to the blue scale to the white belly, I try to preserve as much of that contrast as I can when I'm trimming. So if I have more belly, I'll start by trimming the belly. And what I do is trim the width so that it fits in the head width-wise. And then also the thickness is an issue sometimes. So if it's too thick to fit in, to slide easily into the meathead and pin, then I don't think it'll run right if it's like bulging out of the meathead. So you want to make sure it fits in the head smoothly. That's the first trim that I'm going to make. I cut off any fins, like any fins on the back, or if you have a fin on the belly, I trim those off as well, just to make sure that it's going to run through the water well. And then I try to taper the tail depending on the size of the piece of meat. I also am thinking when I'm trimming, what are the fish eating right now? Are they eating the great big magnum alewives, or are they eating the little 3-inch alewives? And I'm going to cut the strip accordingly. So I'm not going to run an 8-inch strip if they're eating 3-inch alewives, if that's what we're finding in the fish. So I think a little bit match the hatch, but more so you want it to fit in the head properly so that it can get the best roll.
And then, but if you are running it differently, shorter or whatever, I'm still trimming back or adjusting this so that I want the tip of my bait to be before the beginning of the shank, the end of the shank where it's going into the round bed. I always want that adjustment. Yeah. I never want the tail to hang past. Nope. And it's partially of the reason of it gets tangled, or it can actually get hooked by the hook, which then causes it to just go crazy back there. So I'm always, every time we're re-rigging, we're making that adjustment. And we'll stick a toothpick in there to hold it, or tie a rubber band around the backside if it needs it to hold it in place. So, when that fish bites, I don't want that head to slide back, or just from trolling through the water, I don't want the head to be able to slide back. I want it to be kind of pinned and locked in place, but constantly adjusting that.
I think too, Brian, if you decide to, I probably would invest in just 1 or 2 different types of heads, because they all act differently, and that way you can learn how that works. I have 2 different types, and that's what I go to.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about all these different ones. I think if you can get the rotation right on any of them, they'll work right. But some of them are harder to tune than others, for sure. Like Jeremy said earlier, it's the big weenie head is one of the better heads for like remaining true.
I think it runs pretty well right out of the package, but I still tune them. I still look, and to tune them, basically all I do is just tweak the back end of it a little bit. And you got to make really small changes. You don't want to make big dramatic changes in the back of that head, because it'll just start helicoptering on you if you get too aggressive.
That's the thing too, that people do, is they'll take this head. You can see how he has this stored, and all of the teasers are on one side, and then I imagine you lay the head flat, because if it's like this, and then you're tying that down, it's putting all this pressure on that's bending it, and when you undo it, it's going to have more bend than it had before. The same thing, the other way, it would take the bend out. So paying attention to the way that you're storing these is definitely important. And we do have videos. Jeremy and I did some videos on how we store these, and also prepping meat and how we're preparing it for the meatheads and the whole process. So if you go to the how-to section on YouTube, you can find all of those videos there, also on the website.
So we talked about this in that particular video, but I'm pretty meticulous about how all my stuff gets stored. And you can see I have the head. I actually put the head on one side, the teaser's on the other side, on a piece of pipe insulation. And what that does is when you take this rig off the flasher, it's not kinked.
Yeah.
Right. So if you take one off that's not got the pipe insulation, this is all 50 fluoro, and fluoro is pretty stiff, and it doesn't. It wants to take the angle of whatever you put it on. So it just allows that rig to stay straighter and not get those kinks in. And I don't know if it makes a huge difference or not, but in my mind, it runs straighter through the water. It looks better, and it's probably better for the longevity of the rig.
Well, something too with that is, I tie basically all my meat rigs. I'm tying myself, and I tie them all on 40 or 50 fluoro. But when you're in Florida, they stretch to the liters, and it straightens them out. And the same thing is true with any fluoro. So I'll take my meathead and my hook, and I'll hook it on in my rack, and then I just pull down on it fairly hard.
Yeah.
And you give it a couple of quick tugs, and it'll straighten that right back out, and all that memory kind of goes away.
Yeah, that's good. I like Jeremy's setup there is how he stores them, because that is these have to be retied for this coming season still, but if they've been sitting in the box for a few weeks, that I'm stretching them hard to get them straight, because they don't go through the water properly with those kinks on it.
The other thing is, if you put 20 spin doctors in a box like this, it's a lot easier than if you have 20 that don't have the pipe insulation. They just don't get tangled up, and it's a lot easier to just pull what you want. And for no other reason, I think they just store better with the insulation. But that's me.
Yeah, I like to, at least at the bare minimum, I always put a rubber band, and I come around this part of the hook, go back around the backside, and then lock it in place, and it keeps that hook stuck to your meat rig. I mean, most of my I have a lot of meat rigs and rotators on my boat, and most of my boxes are pretty full, and there might be 20 baits in there. Well, if one of them comes loose, now you got 20 baits that are hooked together, and it's really not a fun ordeal to try and get one of them out.
Right.